senses of beauty, or the first sense of it, and that of wonder which follows it, comes realization. And realization stems from the way we were made. Because we had to employ all the laws of the universe to be. And we hold within us the record of the decisions which made us particularly humans. There is the psychic record, there is the physical record, and the choices that we made to satisfy this desire to be, which directed itself to what we now are. I believe that this nucleus lies in the leaf, it lies in the microbe, it lies in everything living. There is a consciousness, I feel, in all living things. How wonderful we would really understand ourselves if we only could capture what could be the consciousness of a rose, which must perforce have such beautiful simplicity that we would be able, I think, to solve our problems with a kind of glow of presentation and offerings that we cannot now do. I am sort of I love beginnings. I marvel at beginnings. I think beginnings is that which confirms its continuation. If nothing were able, it would not be. I revere because it is a fundamental inspiration. It isn't just something which has to do with a duty we have. It is just born into us. The will to learn, the desire to learn is just one of the most, the greatest of inspirations. I am not that revering of education. Learning, yes. Education is something which is always on trial, because any system can never capture the real meanings of learning. In search for beginnings in me, I have come across a thought which really generated by many influences out of the realization that material is spent light. I likened the emergence of light to a manifestation, two brothers, knowing quite well that there are not two brothers. The one is light, non-luminous, and the one is light of prevailing luminous. And this prevailing luminous can be visualized as becoming a wild dance of flame which settles and spends itself into material. Material I believe, the spent light, and that the mountains, the earth, the streams, the air, and we are a spent light. I visualize another source, that of the will to be, to express, which I mentioned to be the other brother, or the one. This is the center of our desires. And desire to be, to express, is a real motivation for living. And I believe there is no other motivation for living than to express. I begin by putting a diagram which may say, calling the desire to be, to express, as silence, the other light. And the movement of silence to light, light to silence, have many thresholds. Many, many, many thresholds. And each threshold is actually a singularity. Each one of us has a threshold in which the meeting of light and silence lodges. And this threshold at this meeting is the position or the aura of the inspirations. The sense of wonder is so important to us because it precedes knowing. It precedes knowledge. When the astronauts went into space and the Earth appeared as a marble, blue and rose, I felt nothing less important than knowing. Especially knowing. Maybe knowledge was still important, but knowing certainly was not. The unmeasurable was the one thing that captivated the mind, and the measurable made very little difference. When we talk about pollution, the worst part about it is that when you see a gentle stream polluted, your sense of wonder about the stream leaves you. And if you go to a stream where the stream is clear, still clear, you feel something ominous about being near the stream, which soon will fall from its position of wonder. Never must that leave our mind. I think the inspiration to learn, if you stop to think of other inspirations, it's pretty hard to find them. I was speaking about the inspiration, for instance, to meet. And I said that all city planning must be part of the inspiration to meet. But then when you think of school, somehow it is also part of the inspiration to meet. There's another inspiration which in my mind is somewhat on trial in the way I express it, and that is the inspiration to well-being. And well-being includes such things as ecology. You can see why the original inspirations, the inspiration, let's say, which comes to us when architecture became an apparent thing. It wasn't at first apparent as anything else but a kind of inspired moment which later acquired a title. But its beginning didn't have a title. And up to now, as it will always be, there is no such thing as architecture. There is the spirit architecture, but it has no presence whatsoever. What does have presence is a work of architecture, and at best it must be considered as an offering to architecture itself, merely because of the wonder of its beginning. So when people talk about architecture being in one niche, and then urban planning being in another, and city planning being in a third, and environmental design being another one, what it is, to me, are purely marketplace divisions. And I feel that it's very destructive if a man on his stationery says that he's all these things. In the marketplace, this would be very much regarded as a great advantage. To a man who feels architecture as a spirit, he cannot title himself this way, because he would consider it pure dissipation of its original inspirations. An architect can build a house and build a city in the same breath if he only thinks about it as being a marvelous, expressive, inspired, expressive realm. Design is to put into being what realization form tells us. You can say form is also what is detected as the nature of something. And design strives to, at that moment, employ the laws of nature in putting it into being, to allow light to come into play. This resource of material to put into presence, this the maker of presences. At that moment only do you put the measurable into what you are doing. Previous to that, everything is fundamentally or tightly unmeasurable. Design demands that one understands the order. When you are dealing or designing in brick, you must ask brick what it wants or what it can do. And if you ask brick what it wants, it'll say, well, I like an arch. And then you say, but arches are difficult to make, they cost more money. I think you can use concrete across your opening equally as well. But the brick says, oh, I know you're right, but if you ask me what I like an arch. And one says, well, now, why be so stubborn, And the arch says, may I just make a little remark? Do you realize you're talking about a beam, and the beam of brick is an arch? That's knowing the order. It's knowing its nature. It's knowing what it can do. And respect that tremendously. If you're dealing with brick, don't just use it as another kind of secondary availability, or that it's cheaper, No. You've got to put it into absolute glory. And that is the only position that it deserves. It deserves that point. If you're dealing with concrete, you must know the order of concrete. You must know its nature, what concrete really strives to be. Concrete wants to be really granite, but can't quite manage. And the reinforcing rods in it are a play of marvelous secret worker that makes this so-called molten stone appear as marvelously capable. It's a wonderful product of the mind. And steel wants to tell you that it can be an insect in strength. And the stone bridge is built like an elephant. A group of architects were chosen to collaborate in the development of the bicentennial plans for Philadelphia. The original concept before any of us got on the scene was that of making a street, which I concur with absolutely, and I think I can say I was the first one to praise the idea of this very simple notion of a street, because a street is really a community room. And it already has tremendous binding character and has a starting point immediately. Instead of thinking of the various items, you might say, you see, like what should be in an exposition. I'll draw that on the other side because it has bearing on this. We drew a building. Looked pretty angry, but this is building. This had three sort of different buildings. Here, there was a series of buildings together in some way like this. It doesn't matter what the shapes are. This building was the courts of the expressions. I'll put down EX. The courts of the expressions. This was to be programmed by the great expressors. Those who are interested in movie, in printing, and painting, sculpture, architecture, all the expressive urges. This was to be programmed by the great scientists who could convey the manifestations of light, of air, of water, of land. So we'll call this the natural resources, the court of the natural sources. Here was a forum of the availabilities. Because the meeting of these, which were connected by a great street that ran here, which had a canal in the center of it, and other transportation facilities in the center, and near the street, and it's a very, very crude diagram indeed, were alcoves, which was, I'll draw it quickly because it takes too long to draw it anyway. This way, were flanking the street, within which there were many availabilities shown, auditoriums, and various places and results of the meeting of, you might say, of light and of silence. In a theater, which I am building in Fort Wayne, Indiana, having observed theaters, I came to the conclusion that one must distinguish the auditorium and the stage as a violin, a sensitive instrument where one is to hear, that a whisper could be heard without any amplification. And that the lobbies and all other adjunct spaces are merely that which composes the violin case. That distinction, the violin and the violin case, they look completely different from each other. Then, going backstage in many of the theaters, I saw what I observed to be just the inside of a wastebasket. As the actor emerged from this wastebasket, he seemed pretty calm and as though nothing happened. But behind stage, it is really, the mop is right next to the person. It's just hell. I decided then to think of it as the actor's house and designed this house a half a mile away from the theater. Regarded the green room as the living room with its fireplace, the practice rooms, the rehearsal rooms, the dressing rooms, all as if it were a function of that house. I even installed a little chapel where a man could think of his lines alone without being prodded. Then I built a porch outside this house, which faced the street on which it was built, and then wheeled it to backstage and presented the porch of the house as that which you see when the curtains are open. I was trying to discover the nature around which design was possible. I think the most inspirational point from which, let us say, architecture can be understood is to regard the room, the simple room, as the beginning of architecture. Or consider a stairway that goes from one level to another as being, in a sense, measured by the agility of a boy with all his coordinating faculties, who has in him this desire to run up the 4 flights in no time flat. So when an architect draws a plan which involves a stairway, he cannot exert enough accuracy where he can draw the walls with a certain abandon. The stair must be drawn as if he has made a ruler, you see, a measurement. That much sense of its importance must be felt. And the stair must have a landing. Well, it's certainly a number of landings. And the landing must want to be a room, really, because the landing is quite a wonderful thing. Because the stair, the same stair, is used by a child, a young man, and an old man. And when the old man ascends the stair with the young boy, when he reaches the landing, there must be there a window, possibly a window seat, and maybe a bookcase. So as he ascends, he says to the boy, "You know, I always wanted to read this book." I think that a plan is a society of rooms. That the plan is one in which the rooms have talked to each other. In another sense, the plan is the structure of the spaces in their light. If you consider the structure is the maker of light, because the structure releases the spaces between the structure. And that is light-giving. Could be an entrance or a window, or even be a little building which has windows in it, because the distance between the columns are so resourceful that you cannot cope with the generosity of a certain construction, like concrete, which has such tremendous power and could have very little material. The play of what may be within the column disciplines is just an endless study. In speaking of the orders, the order of movement, the order of light, the order of wind, of water, may be all reconsidered. I started my studies and I presented to him what I thought after the site was chosen, which took some time. Beautiful site overlooking the Pacific. I presented the seat of the unmeasurable and the seat of the measurable. The laboratories were the seat of the measurable. And the unmeasurable was a house equally as big, containing about 10,000 square feet, with the libraries, a gymnasium, studies, seminar rooms, unnamed places, sort of happening places, a meeting room, and then presented another element, that of a little area of studies, 50 of them, for those who wanted to be close to their work. Studios, so to speak. I felt that these were inseparable elements. And these were not in the program. It was just a sense from the little thing he said that there were unmeasurable qualities in this that made me think of the meeting place and the other buildings. We have only built the laboratory. I explained to him the theories that I had in mind. And during the course of planning, I lost sight myself of these theories. There were so many problems involved that I gave in here and gave in there. But here I placed them away from the laboratories. I placed in one instance laboratories over each other. There were 3 layers overlooking a court. And he said, and there were other things involved. The court, of course, was on this level. He said, how would you like to have the scientist above you pacing the floor and you hearing him below? He just simply took this out and said, you must build this. You see, and not what you had. Where do you find a client who wants less, actually? I don't know where you find him, but he wanted less because it meant more. There was more meaning to this. These studies were planned so that the service of the laboratories were always opposite. The laboratories themselves were here. The service was there. The laboratory was here. There was a drop. There's a lower level here, which doesn't necessary to explain. He didn't even accept this building, this study, to be opposite the laboratory. He said this must be a garden and this must be a garden. Always the garden is present. Another thing, I had another scheme for this, based on a much more interesting idea of laboratories and their service spaces in areas like this. This was about 4 foot deep, and it's 4 foot deep, and you had to crawl in these spaces. These were pipe spaces which gave the utilities necessary in laboratories. I realized all of this was a much more beautiful building, that this was wrong, that there was just as much reason for the pipes to have their freedom as a laboratory. And so this space that I mentioned here became the service space, which was equally as high as the laboratory itself. It increased the cost by twice. And I said, I cannot work on this anymore, because I came to the realization that this was not truly a laboratory for biological reasons, for biological study, because the spaces had to be free of any kind of opening of ceiling to get at the utilities, which this required, to keep as firmly aseptic conditions as you can have. Now, this was approved. It was approved, of course, because there were good resources. The March of Dimes was certainly a very fine resource. And also, Salk's reputation was nothing to sneeze at. Those things combined to make this change from drawings which were completed here at a cost of about $250,000. It was completely scrapped. And this building was built, which seemed to everybody to be a mere box, you see, compared to what could be exciting and a little bit more angry looking, you know, which is always so very charming today. And so, then this one, you see. So, now during the course of study, the building, which fundamentally were two buildings, these were this building, with some studies outside. I studied for 2 years what this court was going to be and how it was going to be landscaped. There was a well-known landscape architect who came because I couldn't make up my mind what to do. He was put on the job of suggesting, you see, what this should be. And he came in with a bag of tricks, including the most gnarled olive trees, you see, which would be placed in this site. And also have the rush of water in it, so that you can, the sense of smell, as he put it, and the sound of water could be felt in the square. I was very distressed because I knew that these olive trees were ripped from their locations, put in as a mere decoration, see in this place. So I called Luis Barragan, who is landscape architect, and he's architect superb. And he came and he looked across the Pacific here, and he felt the concrete walls, which are really magnificent walls. And he said, there should be no garden here. It should be just a plaza. I looked at Dr. Salk, he looked at me, and it was a complete confirmation. This man, who had never seen the building before, I struggled for 2 years to think of what kind of tree to use in this place and what the garden should be like. And he comes and tells us something that became absolutely obvious to us that it was the thing to do. Previous to that, I had a different scheme. I had a scheme, and that was also the other building, of having 4 buildings instead of 2. I had also a garden of equal size here and there. Salk asked me, I know how you're going to design this garden, but how will you design that garden? Identical conditions here and there and there. I was thinking too that this garden wouldn't be the same as this garden. Then he said, what is a more powerful connection between the laboratories and the garden? 1 garden or 2 gardens? It was obvious that it should be just 1 garden. 1 garden would be respected. The 2 gardens would be just an exercise in landscaping and nothing more. It would have no symbolic position. This building is very important to me because there was a collaborator, the one who knew what he wanted, the one who knew how to make it, but one did not keep any secrets of the nature that he was guarding from the other. I would say that a city should consider all its spaces it makes as belonging to the treasury of spaces. In the environment, of broad availabilities, constantly growing to new availabilities. And the architecture of connection that could be felt throughout the plan, the availabilities and the locations and the localities, served by the orders of service, which should be distinctly a different architecture than that of the buildings of the city, of the, you might say, the institutions. Now I know that institutions is not a word to use, but I believe it's a very excellent word, of excellent identification. It tells you that there is an agreement in back of their making. Now, they may be made, they may be there, because the inspirational qualities that made them, this very moment, where science and light meets into a realization, that it has lost the inspirational impact of it, and it became operational. Therefore, it wasn't felt. There is a reason why the town must become more and more resourceful, more full of availabilities. It is demanded now that everything must be in a town and not be dispersed. If a new town is considered, it must not just be a chunk of the town people who move to this locality. But it should be the great opportunity to make new expressions of fundamentally the redefinitions of everything that is in the town that you just left. For instance, today a street must be distinguished from a road. Today, the streets in town are nearly all roads and not streets. A street is community room without a roof. The walls that flank the room are the buildings that are on it. It is established also by human agreement. Human agreement is that sense, as simple as, isn't it a nice day today? Agreement is not equal in each, but there is a sense of unanimity without example. It is what made the school a school, or inspired the first school room. There was undeniable agreement that this man, who seems to sense things which others don't, should be near the children so they can benefit from such a man. I want to tell you something more about a room that's so marvelous. A room is a place. Let us say a small room. Is a place where if you're with only one other person, that you can be generative. You can say what you never said before. The vectors somehow of two meet. Let there be a third person, and it becomes entirely too complicated. And you resort to your lines that you've said before, maybe to please the moment. You may put what you said first one time, second, and what you said in the eighth instance first. The walls seem to talk to you and give you a sense of what to say. In a large room, I'm afraid it becomes purely a performance, unless you find a smiling face constantly which keeps telling you that what you're saying is worthwhile. Then maybe you can generate something. But I assure you that everything that I tell you now, I've said before. Room is a marvelous, sensitive thing. If you were to take the baptistry in Florence and speak there, though it is a large room, its proportions, its shape, its octagon, can make you also equally generative, because the shape itself is like a personality. I'm sure that I would say things I never said before. Such is the power of spaces. So when you hear of prefabricated systems, you feel of the tremendous loss there would be if one had to resort to this for all buildings that are built. I just want to make my last remark in reverence for the work that has been done by architects of the past. That what was, considering the inspirational qualities, what was has always been. What is has always been, and what will be has always been. Such is the nature of beginning, the power of acceptance, the qualities of commonality, of human agreement. It is to be trusted beyond any kind of operational system. To be trusted, far beyond the discoveries or the statistical analysis of things as they are. Because things as they are have nothing to do with desire. And desire is the real motivating force for living and expressing. And thank you very much.